The love of Christ impels us to put on the new man, to become the new creation. One of the worst tempests in my life, one of the worst storms I ever faced, was a storm that was just in my heart. I was working for people. I had adopted a value system and a culture that was theirs, and I was helping gray areas in tax reporting, so basically I was lying for the company on tax returns, and I was rewarded for this. And in this process of sin, I attributed other sins to myself, and I ended up with envy, with pride, with wrath, with thinking I was owed. And I went from stealing for the company to stealing from the company. That then let me open up the doors to other issues of lust and wrath and anger. And all the time, I am serving as a Eucharistic minister. All the time, I am receiving the body and blood, and I'm distributing the body and blood, and I'm eating condemnation on myself because I am not free of sin. I am not seeking healing. I'm not seeking redemption and reconciliation. Instead, every Sunday, I'm participating in an even greater mortal sin because I'm bringing that sin on myself. By the grace of God, I had the ability to turn to Jesus for healing, and I had the ability to repent, and I had the ability to change. And I went through a period of great humiliation and humility to change. But luckily, the whole storm played out inside my heart, and Jesus was able to convict me and convert me. Now I have a 16-year-old son who holds up the mirror of different pieces of my life and says, but you were a sinner, but you were a sinner, but you were a sinner. And so now I have this walk that is very public because I have a 16-year-old son watching everything I do, hearing everything I say. So I am held to a much higher standard than anybody else because I have a son, right? That's what fatherhood does for us. Our modern-day apostles are in a boat and are trying to figure out how to wake up Jesus because the storms are crashing over the boat. They just met last week. They just agreed 76 to 24 to try to figure out how to talk to the current father of our nation. Because we have a situation where the most public political leader in America, the gift that God has given us to be our president, is a practicing Catholic who receives the Eucharist on a weekly basis. But also, he teaches things that are not in line with the teachings of the church. He has public stances about gender fluidity and marriage that is not with the teachings of the church, but he is very privately, very public in receiving the Eucharist. And so here is this thing. How do we teach the truth of who Jesus is? Because he changes our lives. He is truly present in the Eucharist. And we know from Paul that if we eat him without discerning him, we bring that sin upon ourselves. And I know personally, and can testify personally to months and months of dealing with how do I turn away from the worst that I'm doing, which is receiving the Eucharist improperly because I know I'm a sinner. But how do I turn to Jesus for healing, the same Jesus that's truly present in the Eucharist? And this is a terrible, terrible thing to do personally. But when you have scandal because of the way you're living, if you are publicly living with another person that you're not married to in the church, and you are publicly receiving communion, then you show other people that this sin doesn't matter. And that's that tough piece, because we are all called to walk with Christ. We are all called to a higher standard. We have put on the new man. We are supposed to set aside the things of the flesh. The love of Christ impels us to be something different. The witness that we make to our children, to our sons and daughters, to our brothers and sisters, to our greater family, of what living a Christian life means. How do we love? How do we have mercy? How do we show kindness? How do we live the Beatitudes in our daily life? That witness that says we are Catholic is something that we're supposed to do day in and day out. And that going to confession to help change our lives is something that we do as Catholic. So that when we receive the body and blood, when we receive all that Jesus is, he can clean us, he can heal us, he can save us. And that's a personal walk that we take, but it's also a public walk, because when we tell people that we are Catholic, we are showing them that we expect them to hold us to a higher standard. And so that's that peace, and that's why the boat right now is in turbulent waters, and that's the peace that we need to be praying for our bishops, because they want to come together with a way of teaching on the beauty of the Eucharist that brings unity and love, the signs of the church, instead of division and judgment, because division and judgment are the signs of the devil. And so that's that tough, tough walk. And as a father with a wife and a son, I have to always try to figure out how I can have unity and harmony with my wife so that my son doesn't throw stones at me. But that's the beautiful thing, because every day we get up and pray. Every week we have the opportunity for reconciliation, for confession. And every Sunday Jesus gives us himself, the healing bread of life, all of the divinity of God here in the Eucharist. And that is such a